Historian, like Historian's a world-class product, but you know, not enough people are storing enough of their data, right? If you want to be doing analytics, if you want to build machine learning models, you have to have history. You have to have the data. And you know, this happens to be a comment from ABI Research. I've seen other similar comments, right? Whether it's 1% or 5% of the data, it's like, it's just a shame that 95% of the data that's produced by our equipment and is not actually being used. And in the world where AI is going to be able to find correlations that you didn't know existed, you have to have that data. And so for us, right, Historian is about, not only do we support the very small historians associated with SCADAs, that's fine, right? But we've been also focusing on how do we make Historian more extensible. If you want to run Historian in your plant or on your line or on your machine, great. How do we help you aggregate all of that data? Maybe your IT organization wants eventually to move a lot of that data into a data lake to mash it up with other business data. You know, so we've built cloud native versions of Historian. Maybe you're starting to think about, I'm interested, here's a show of hands. Who in this audience, I know you're all Windows servers users because you're using iFix and Historian. Whose IT organizations or your organizations like are thinking about or are preferring Linux and container-based applications? Small number. Okay, it's going to come. There's a cost to Windows. There's a cost to all those shutdowns for doing Windows updates. Linux will be more cost effective in the future. It will be more reliable. It will be more scalable. So our vision is we're going to continue to support you on your journey and support the Windows-based applications. But for applications that require scale, we're also building Linux and container-based applications that are modern and can be deployed within your data centers, on your servers, or on the cloud, giving you that flexibility of where you want. And Historian's a perfect example. Historian and Scheduler, right? If you've got a multi-site enterprise, why not put that Historian data in the cloud? Why manage another set of servers to bring all of that data from your plants together? It doesn't need to be in a plant, right? In your cloud infrastructure. If you want to host it as SaaS, we're starting to launch a SaaS version of Historian. You want Historian, but you don't want to manage another server? Let us manage it for you, very cost effectively. Okay. On top of that, right? So we have built, and this will perhaps only apply to the small number of you, but we've bought the most highly scalable Historian on the planet. We have not launched it to the market yet. I'm telling you something that will come out later this year. We have a lead customer who is I think the world's largest, certainly North America's largest green energy producer. That is my lead customer. They will start going into production in June with this solution. Their intent is they have 600 sites, so this is wind farms, solar farms, batteries, all the green sources. Every piece of data coming off of every one of those assets is going to flow into a single Historian on AWS. 600 sites, 80 million sensor streams at once a second. For them, that's 800 billion samples a day. We've tested the 1.4 trillion and samples a day, and we just kind of turned it off because I didn't want to pay AWS anymore for testing performance, right? But perhaps nobody in this room needs that. Perhaps if there's folks from Novo Nordisk, right, you could think about, we could have a single OT data store for all of the data from across our plants, so we now have the ability to do comparisons across plants that we couldn't do before, right? So very large enterprises could, utility scale, right? These are, utilities often have this scale. Not only are we bringing that data to the cloud, all of those samples we're also replicating into Databricks for them. We've built a whole series of new Services, there's a subscription service, so your applications can subscribe to data sets. There'll be an ad hoc calculation service. So if you just want to do a calculation and don't want it stored anywhere, you just want to do a calculation on historian data, you'll be able to go to a display and type in a calculation, and we'll generate it. So just wildly scalable, and the ability to do things that are different. It's likely going to come with different commercial models, because I know today, like, you don't want to pay for the traditional historian model, right? You pay for tags to store data that you don't know if you're going to need. Like, that's kind of a dumb pricing model, right? We're going to fix that, right? We got to find a way to let you store all this data that might have value in the future that you don't know if it has value yet. You don't know what the value will be when AI starts to get applied, right? So those are things we're starting to think about. But our goal here is, like, be that supplier of that data infrastructure for your operations that then will allow you to create value on top of that data. We've also started to add in, so let's go to past that, right? That was the SaaS version. We've built, so if you've used Historian and you've used IH SQL, like, you had to be a SQL expert. Well, those are fewer and fewer, right? So we built a Gen AI tool that lets you tell the tool what's the query that you want to build, and it will build the SQL query, right? So again, we're starting to think about how do we make the technology easier to use by people that have a question but don't necessarily know the semantics of getting the answer to that. And now we're also starting to use agentic AI to do things like optimize server and performance collector performance, publish data, right? Automatically create new, you need a new collector spun up. Well, I don't want to have to go through a 5-screen step to do it. Automatically restart services if we sense a service is down. It was a number of years ago, I was actually at Nurion up in Gothenburg, and the system manager there said, look, I hate it when my operator calls me and says he doesn't have data on his screen, and that's when I know I have a system problem. Like, how do we move to proactive system management? So that's that third, that AI is enabling us to invest here, not a ton of money, but enough money where we can allow your administrators know that there's a problem with data. Maybe it's stale data, maybe a PLC's down, or communications to a PLC's down. How do we alert you to that? If that data is important, then having good data is important, so you need to understand when the data flow is failing, right? So that's part of our job. And then just here's some screens, right, where we're building in predictive intelligence. We've got models around sensor failure, right? How do you monitor? We can help you monitor all of your sensors. If you've got a temperature on a tank, that temperature doesn't change very fast, right? You got a big tank, right? Well, if all of a sudden we see a rapid rise or a rapid decline in that temperature, we can tell you probably have a sensor problem. You have a measurement problem, right? So again, for people to rely on the results of AI, frankly, or BI, or other reporting, or other screens, like, the data has to be good. So we have to help you with tools on understanding, do you have problems? So this is an example of Gen AI. Like, hey, I'm your historian agent. How can I help you? Show me my collector performance. Okay, well, here it is. I don't have to go to a screen. I can just ask the question. Generate a time series chart. So if you think about, you're in the administrator, this is not really a runtime function, but you're setting up the system. You want to know if the data's good. You want to show me time series for this set of tags, and it pops up a display. So you could compare that to what's in your HMI SCADA. Oh, okay, well, the data that's going into the historian is the right data. Like, so how do we make it simpler? You didn't have to do this, right? We did it for you, right? Change it to a bar chart.